Arrival of Hayden signals that it's 6:30 and on the dot.
Jolly good. I know, I'm glad I'm on time for something.
So, we are now live. So, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the meeting of the Local Development Framework Subcommittee on the 4th of July 2023. Thank you for everybody that's turning out tonight, and I remind you all that we are broadcast live on YouTube across the world, so it'll be interesting to see who's tuning in. Right, members, does everybody have sight of the agenda? Yeah, so we'll go straight to agenda item number 1, which is the evacuation procedure. I wouldn't ordinarily say that everybody in the room is familiar with it, but I'm pleased to introduce to you Keir, who is sitting over here. Keir is in with work experience, and Keir's ambition is to look at considering a degree in university in politics. So hopefully he will not put her off her ambitions tonight when she's finished listening to us for the best part of 2 hours, or perhaps 4 hours. So Keir, you're very welcome. So this is just for you. It's the evacuation procedure. There is a location plan of the exits and the assembly points situated on the doors of this room. Please familiarise yourself with them. One door there, one door behind us. On discovering a fire, please carry out the following. Sound the alarm and attack the fire, if possible and safe to do so, using the appliances provided. I don't think they're down there. All right, that's good. I think they're holding all the doors open.
So, of course, as I did, I was always advised never to use them anyway, to get out.
On hearing the evacuate signal, please carry out the following. Exit the building by your nearest and safest exit. All visitors to report to assembly point G. All staff to report to their delegated assembly point car park. Assembly point G is on the corner of the car park on the far wall. Please do not leave the assembly point for any reason until told to do so by the incident controller or the fire brigade officer. And this evening, the incident controller will be Mr. Tony. Is everybody okay with that? Any questions? You test afterwards. Okay, thank you much indeed. Apologies for absence or a member's away on official business. Now, looking at the form, I don't think we have got any apologies, have we? We have a full house. Excellent. Members, does anybody have any disclosable pecuniary or non-pecuniary interests on any agenda item this evening? Non-declared. Thank you much indeed, which moves us swiftly on to agenda item number 4, which is the minutes of the LDF subcommittee held on the 23rd of February. Can I please do them for accuracy? First off, so that's page 4 of 1, which is page 3 of 205 in your pack. Page 4 of 2, which is page 4 of 205 in your pack. Okay, members, do you agree that they are a true and accurate record? Yes. And are you happy for me to sign them? No, thank you very much indeed. Right. That moves us on to agenda item number 5, which is the North Warwickshire Local Plan process for review. I don't think we've spoken about this at all recently, so Dot, over to you.
I think it's just one item that I'd like to update members with, and that's where the levelling up and regeneration bill is. It's going through the House of Lords at the moment, and it's at the reporting stage. It's finished its committee stage, so it's just about to go into its reporting stage. Other than that, it was just to point out that it is looking to reduce the number of months that it does take to produce a local plan down to, it suggested 30 months. So table 1 on page 10 of your pack just highlights the sort of timeline of production that we had previously for the core strategy and the local plan. It's just to give members an idea of how long they have actually taken in the past. And of course, the current local plan though, got development management policy, got site allocations in, so it all depends at the end of the day what the local price will be in terms of what a local plan should include. And then finally, at section 8, you've got on page 11 just what the next steps that I'm suggesting, that we continue with the production of the draft employment plan and the Gypsy and Travellers plans, that we publish the AMR in the autumn, which is your annual monitoring report of the local plans. So that would be the second one that we will have produced. And then just to monitor as to what the changes are that the government introduces as we go through. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Richard. And let me just take opportunity to thank the officers for the training that they've done recently. Very informative and very well delivered. So very grateful. So members, do we have any questions on agenda item number 5 in the review plan? Michael.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's obvious that obviously a lot of work that you've put in, Doc. You can see in the team as well. So doing the review must be an extra pleasure for you. Have we any updates or any information or info that were coming down the road, as it were, that supports the development?
The only update that I have is that the outline business case has gone from National Highways to the Department of Transport, and now we await the results of that. So unfortunately, I have got no.
At least that is an update, though. It's an update that we don't know still.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Members, Rachel?
Yeah, can I ask a question? It's more about the paperwork, this one. I find it really difficult to manage paperwork when it's dumped as 200 pages. It would be far easier for me to manage if we had different attachments to our email. So 1 for the agenda, 2 for the next paper, 3 for the next paper. So each paper was distinct and separate, and then it can be managed and we can refer to the page numbers of that particular document, which is far easier both online and if you're managing it on paper or a combination of the two. Then the second question was just, do we have a timeline for the review and the draft policies on Gypsy and Travellers and on?
That's actually part of the next board report, which is your local development scheme, which is basically the work programme for the next three years.
Thank you. And in terms of the presentation of the reports and the difficulty of reading them on an iPad, I totally agree with you. I think the only solution we've got at the moment is if you speak to Democratic Services, they'll print you off a set. But I can't survive on a 200-page PDF.
They are printed, but then when they're updated a day before the meeting, it becomes really unmanageable.
Oh,
so when we get like another report a few days before, which I think we have had from the chief executive this time, it's then difficult to slot in because the page numbers that I may have printed out are then different to the page numbers that are referred to. And I think my point still stands that if we had each document as a distinct document, it would then be easier to manage and refer to different page numbers.
So is that doable to print out each agenda item as a separate PDF?
Chair, it's a bit more within my remit because it's within Democratic Services. We can look at the options for that. There's several historic reasons why it's been done this way, but I think that it may be appropriate to take the views generally of members and chairs of as to what's manageable. Because obviously, what we don't want to do is make a change to a process and then find that actually cause a difficulty elsewhere. So I'm happy to take that up and to just a very brief sort of consultation about the matter and particular views members have, and then we see what changes.
As well. I think everybody shares Rachel's frustration trying to work through. Indeed, with planning, it's 3 different PDFs, each of over 150 pages long.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
It's just doesn't quite work, does it? Okay, it's a challenge. Right. Any more questions on agenda item number 5?
Yes, please.
David?
Can I ask the, sorry, I was looking at 2023 and June 23, which is page 5/12. Initial update of the MPPF published and the decision to review. I can understand that, but under that in November, you say scoping and call for sites. We have reserve sites at the moment. Do they come forward naturally, or does people have to come again and say we'd like these to come forward? And I'm not sure. You've got what's the LERB mean?
The LERB is the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill.
Okay.
So that's the one that's just going through Parliament.
And the ministerial statement and consultation on reforms to policy that will come out in the MPPF. And I just wonder if we're guessing what's going to come, because you're going to ask people to bring sites forward, etc. And then that will be like Chinese sticks, throw it up in the air, see where it lands.
Okay. That column there for NWBC was my suggested work programme if we started a review as of now to see whether we could actually hit the deadline of June 25. And as you can see, we definitely don't meet that deadline. So this is only a draft idea in order for me to see what was going on at the moment elsewhere in terms of the changes to the national policy, the LERB, so the Levelling Up Bill, and the transitional arrangements, just to see whether we were far out from actually going within the current system. And I just don't see how we could go into the current system and by June 2025. So that isn't a suggestion of that this is the work programme. That's just my idea that these are the sorts of things we've got to do in the current system. Could we meet the June 25 deadline?
Oh, okay, because one thing I was thinking in the chair is, for example, when the MPPF comes in, change that so that you can completely rebuild our lead in a way, like slap bang, because the rules change.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you, David. Mark?
Thank you. I'm sorry if I've got confused with this. So my question might actually not make any sense, but
I'm sure it will. I'm sure it will.
From what I remember from previous conversations, government is overhauling the scheme. There is a proposal. It's going to radically change it, and there's an opportunity to wait or to, if you like, be an early engagement. I don't think we've made a decision yet, have we, on whether we are early or whether we will wait. I understand what you're saying. This is just trying to measure can we or can't we. But if we are, at what stage should we make a decision over whether we want to stick with the plan system as long as we can, including any reviews or what have you that we wish to have, or go on to the early adopters provision? Because from what I remember, there was possibility of additional funding, if you will, to enable us to become an early adopter. And I'm just not clear, I see, how the opportunity to be an early adopter or fits in with this.
And the context of your question is in the whole planning process, not just the local planning process.
Okay. The early funding, as far as I can recall, was for the infrastructure levy, and that was a pilot. Consultation responses have been made on the infrastructure levy, and now we're waiting the government to determine whether they go ahead with that, whether they introduce a pilot. We have indicated that we might be interested with that. So that is where I think the early funding from. In terms of the review of a local plan, the full council decision is that we will review the local plan, but once the regulations are more known about, understood, and so that we'll do a progress report as and when we get things through to determine exactly, well, have we got enough information now that we can do that? But that would be in relation to the whole of the review. And as to the side of that, though, we've got two issues of the employment and Egyptian travellers that we want to progress as much as we can, because we've said that we would do those following the adoption of the local plan. So it's sort of divided into those sections, and it will be something that we will have to keep under review. And at some stage, it may be that even though we work on the employment plan and the Egyptian traveller, they might have to move over to the new system, depending on the regulations and the guidance that comes out. But that will be something that we can take into consideration once we know what that is. Helpful?
Okay, Mark, you've got a second. I mean, obviously we are talking about an emerging environment in terms of government policy. But Mark, carry on.
I appreciate the answer. It was clear as mud. You know, and I'm sorry, I just don't get it. I'm struggling with this. So what I think we're saying is that things are changing, but we don't know when they'll change and how they'll change. Notified that we might want to be an internal.
From a whole planning perspective.
But I still don't see how that fits with the transitional arrangements column in terms of the deadline for the old style plan and the first date for the new style plans and what our options aren't. I'm sorry, I know this is all up in the air, but I just don't.
I think it's a pretty difficult question. Go on, go.
So what I tried to do in the table, so under NWBC was my suggested timeline of all the different processes, and in the current system you can see which regulations they actually refer to. So I tried to see if there was any way that we could actually work towards the submission of a local plan before the deadline of June 25, which is in the draft consultation showing what the transitional arrangements potentially could be. And as you can see, an old style local plan would have to be submitted by June 25. I think our submission would come after that, at least in the autumn, not later, if we were going to review a whole local plan, because of the amount of time and work that would be needed for that. Single issue plans, however, such as employment, that may be different, and we may be able to get and meet that submission deadline of June 25.
Thank you. Much clearer.
Good. Is everybody following the debate? Move on to David. Yeah, David.
Yeah. First of all, apologies for my ignorance, Chair, but I've always been good at ignorance, so I don't think. You know, what I'm really concerned about is I think that we've got a fair idea now of the housing allocations and know where they're going and like, and you know, like it or dislike it, we know what's happening there, or we've got a fair idea. With regard to employment, this seems to me to be much more fluid, and we don't really know where we are with that. And so my first question, well, I suppose it applies to the Egyptian travellers sites as well. When are we likely to sort of get some idea how that is evolving and have some idea of when the employment sites are going to be allocated, Egyptian travellers sites are going to be allocated, as it were? So that's my question.
Okay. If they get approved to go out for consultation, they would go out for consultation because the first consultation would be on their scope, issues and options. So that is very broad brush, asking very broad questions and getting responses to those. But alongside that, we would go out for what's called a call for sites. And that is where you basically are asking anybody who has a piece of land, a building or anything like that, are they interested in putting that site forward? Now, that doesn't mean to say that will be the end allocation at all. It just means that we're then aware of where the sites are, what they are, the size of them and things like that. There would then need to be an assessment of all of those sites, or at least the majority of them, depends whether we, on the number, whether you cull some of them at a very early stage and just say, no, we're not looking at those until we've looked at these ones. So in the next report, you'll see in the local development scheme, in the timeline there, we're suggesting consultation on the scoping issues and options this autumn, that alongside the call for sites, and then it would be next summer, I think it is, that we would then do the next stage of actually trying to produce the first draft of a plan that would give you that information. And that would be our aim.
So if I might, Chair, so
So you're merging into agenda item number 6 and 8.
oh, right, sorry, I'll shut up then and come to agenda.
And then after, if we haven't answered all your questions after 8, come back.
Thank you very much.
Everybody okay with debate? Anybody else want to add anything on agenda item number 5, or just pull everybody back to where they are? So let's just go to the recommendation as outlined in the report. Now, I see the recommendation is for executive board.
Yes.
Yeah. We approve. In terms of process, we're proposing this recommendation goes to executive board.
Chair, obviously, it's the parent committee.
Yeah. So there's the vote that we're taking tonight is to say put this recommendation through to executive board, and that is recommendation A, that the local development scheme be updated to reflect continued production of the employment and gypsy and traveller development plans, and B, following publication of the AMR 22-23, a further report be brought back to this subcommittee and therefore the executive board to consider the next stages in terms of plan making. Are we okay with that? Okay. In terms of the board, of the subcommittee, can I take a vote, please? All those in favour of the recommendation? Indeed, and that is unanimous. Right. Agenda item number 6, which in this meaty pack is page 18 of 205 if you're following it online, which is the local development scheme, the LDS. Dot.
Yeah, so this is essentially the work programme for the next 3 years, as we know it, as we sit here today, I suppose. So this can be updated on a regular basis, so it could be approved today, updated whenever. And so as you can see, following on from the previous question, on page 23 of the pack,
205, yeah.
you'll see Appendix A there, which gives you an outline of when we think the documents can be produced by. So for both the Gypsy and Travellers DPD and the Employment DPD, the consultation this autumn, the publication of a draft local plans next summer, with the submission and examination starting late next year, early 2025, with adoption in 2025. Alongside that as well, you'll see that we've also got the list of supplementary planning documents as well. So they are the ones that add meat to the bones of the existing policies within the local plan. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Chairman. It's on that Appendix A, really, and in respect of the documents that are going to consultation in 2023 in the winter, particularly the residential design SPD. if it's going to be consulted on winter 2023, what implies it will be with this soon. But my only concern is some of these are going to be vast documents. And actually will have an enormous amount of, hopefully will have a significant amount of detail. And I, at this point, I have no particular concerns over it being consulted on in the winter and adopted next summer. But we should just allow, I think, for internal debate. Some of these things are ones that will require a lot of consideration by members. And whilst I accept it can be changed tomorrow and it can be pushed back and all the rest of it, the thing I know is that the residential design guide cover contentious issues. And I'm not saying it can be best done, but I'd just like to be sure that if it's going out to consultation this winter, to be sure that we've had enough time to go through it. And then on the design principles, H4 and H2, again, my memory is going, but I'd like to think that we're going to have design principles. And the rest, if we are doing that, if I remember properly, when do they come forward to be added on to the other, I guess, BDs? I think these are that's the begins to set the blue development, gives local residents and everybody else real say what blueprint stage as well as what happens in the detail stage. So I think they're important to ensure that we've got enough time to consider them ourselves, then send them up for consultation. So we can see where those dates are.
So, question about complexity and coordination and member consideration as well as public engagement.
Yes, I think probably on reflection, you're absolutely right that the winter this year may be too ambitious for that particular one, and particularly because the government's changed to being more design codes rather than residential design guides. So I'm happy to take that away and re-look at that. In terms of the site specifics, the H4 and H2, we'd always left them within the local development scheme almost as a fallback position, because we're expecting an awful lot of that to be included within the master plan process. So as part of H4, for example, a lot of the design principles, well, some of the design principles will already be through the Dordon neighbourhood plan and that side as well. So it was almost like a fallback position that if those don't come forward, then we would be producing these. So, but I'm more than happy to take that away and re-look at that.
Thank you. There's one thing I forgot, and that was: are we producing some form of climate emergency SPD? I think there's a lot going on in terms of, well, there should be a lot going on in terms of how addresses climate emergency.
Yeah, well, it's a good point. Having means we've adapted the climate strategy 2 meetings ago.
In relation to climate, that is an interesting one. To be honest, we're waiting to see what happens with the Warwick District plan, because that deals with some climate issues in a recent document that is just going through examination. Because what they tried to do was do a supplementary planning document, but got pulled back on it and had to actually produce a policy document instead. So that meant it couldn't just be approved for consultation, out for consultation and then adopted. It needed to go through the submission to the Secretary of State and the examination and all of that. So it looks like that is now being progressed and moving towards modifications. So that is an indication of the sort of way that we would have to go. But we've been waiting to make sure that the planning inspector actually accepts the issues that it's been covering to determine exactly whether that was something that was acceptable outside of a local plan process, because for me that's an intrinsic part of the local plan itself, and so it's one of those that we were waiting to see, but we're getting close now where we'll know which direction.
So when are work going to examination then?
It went to examination, I think, late last or early it would be earlier this year. They've received the inspector's report, and I think now we're waiting to see the modifications on that document. So, and it'll be interesting to see what it actually calls as well when it finally gets adopted.
Michael, you were going to say something? I've got you there.
It was just to give a little bit more background on that as a Warwickshire issue, as part of the SWAPO group, which is the Coventry Solihull Warwickshire area, which has been involved primarily with the joint planning space for all. Obviously, in terms of financial, if you get more people, larger basic evidence-based work like the strategic flood risk assessments and similar, it is cheaper and you get a more consistent approach in Solihull area. That SPD DPD split was critical. If it's an SPD almost, we can do joint working. If it's a DPD, then it will be back down to individual local plan document, i.e. a local plan. That does make it more complex, difficult to deliver, and it doesn't necessarily help us to get consistency across the board into insulation rates, energy generation from residential sites, as you would hope you would get consistency as well. We have very high standards, and Nuneaton doesn't have very high standards. Yes, developers playing off against each other. So until we knew or know where that inspectors, as a joint working group, myself and Dorothy are in various infrastructure conference, that will inform us as to whether we can go ahead or not. Then what we will see if the SPD approach is the direct approach, and then perhaps go forward with a joint approach. And
which is more clearly climate change response needs, isn't it?
it's less costly.
So I'm conscious, Michael, we've got some new members. Got you there, Rachel. Got some new members. In the best spirit of just a minute, can you just explain without reputation deviation what an SPD is and what DPD is?
Supplementary planning documents provide the guidance for the adopted local plan, the context of it, the details, design, implications, and implementation of it. They won't always be wholly clear, or they may well leave issues like design to further documents. And that's where supplementary planning documents are created. They don't have the weight of a development. Effectively, they inform and guide the development. With the development plan adopted policy, they do have considerable weight. A development plan is effectively a local development plan. That has far greater weight. It is adopted policy that the council has to follow. SPD guidance, you can, merits in the case, can change. It can have some flexibility. Development plan document. That's the first port of call to make a decision based on the policies in it.
Excellent. 1 point, Mr. Diffin. Rachel, you were going to ask a question.
Yeah, just about the employment DPD and whether that consultation date needs to be fixed in stone, because I think a call for employment sites really does need to be informed by what's happening with the A5 and the funding that, and that seems to be uncertain from what you said as a timeline in terms of when we'll have a decision about that. And also some of this as well also seems up in the air, because And this certainly isn't a criticism of our officers. We don't know when the National Planning Policy guidance is going to come out from LERB. So, and that may have more to say, particularly about gypsies and travellers. So I think it's, but I think particularly for our area and particularly for the north of our area, then the employment DPD has to take into consideration our strategic road network. What's happening with that?
Yes, Dot?
When we produce a policy document, it's at various stages. So the first stage is looking just at the broad issues and options and the scope of the document. We then can produce a draft plan itself. So throughout the process, though, we're continually collecting evidence in terms of, well, what are the sites and where are they, and then the infrastructure itself. But it gets to a stage where it's almost that you need to know where the sites are in order to do strategic transport assessments, because you need to test that plan as to what the implications are for that particular development. And it gets difficult when you are looking at scenarios instead of actual sites. So at various stages, we look at the various scenarios of, well, should it be, I don't know, at motorway junctions, and what's the implications of that? Should it be along the A5, and what's the general implications of that? But it's not until you actually get the detail of a range of sites that then you can put into the modelling to then determine what are the road improvements that would be required to deliver that particular development or that amount of development. So the local plan as such, and even if it's just a topic based, it builds up a picture as it goes through the process, and through the consultation it tries to say, well, this is our latest evidence, this is what we think the situation is at this moment in time, what's your view of that? And we do that at the various stages. And then there's always the option, if we don't take into account something that somebody's highlighted, that they can then make a formal representation when we get to the submission stage. And then that's heard by the planning inspectorate or planning inspector. So, yeah, it's one of those that, as a layperson, it is difficult to say, well, we should wait until we know X before we do all of these other bits. But unfortunately, with planning, it seems to be that we're constantly on the move and we're trying to fill in the gaps in the jigsaw as we go along. And so, yeah, I'm afraid it's one of those moving feasts as we go. But we try to get as much information as we can.
That answer makes perfect sense.
Okay.
So it's just
Excellent.
really, if it's been going out for consultation in the autumn, and I think this is something that Councillor Simpson mentioned earlier, when are we going to, and when are we going to be able to look at it and discuss it? Because in my head, the autumn is like a month or so away, and between now and then, some people have holidays, officers included, I would expect.
But yeah,
Tell us when the winter equinox is.
well, it depends. But in terms of the employment paper, I was hoping to have brought that this evening, but I don't feel that it's in a fit state to actually bring it to you this evening. So in discussion with the chairman, either we'll be looking for a separate meeting to actually talk about that, or else we'll be aiming for the next meeting, scheduled meeting of this subcommittee, which is the 11th of September. So it'll be either before then, if we possibly can, and I feel that it's in a state that I would like to discuss it with you, or it'll be at the 11th of September.
I take it everybody's happy to come in for extra meetings and discussions to get these things right. It's just, it strikes me, it's a really complex time for the work of this, you know, and it has always been since we've been always been a bit of a moving feast as policy and as government decisions are made. Yeah. David?
Earlier you just said about, consultation, and it's a live document and it's on the move all the time. If there's tweaks to plans, certain areas, whether it's industry or H2 or H4, do we go back to consultation? Because I can see people looking at the fact, and I'll use IM Properties as an excuse here, not in this area, but Junction 11. One-off site for Jaguar Land Rover, 3.75 million stock, and it hasn't happened. So there are now about 4 companies on there, one of which is a local distribution company, which is DSL. There's another one going on there at the moment. That consultation, when they did it, it said there'd be 3,000 vehicle moves, of which 800 HGVs. It's like twice that now. I mean, in terms of 3,000, the bit of Jaguar there at the moment, it's got 1,200 employees. Well, there's 2,500 vehicles. Do we go back to speak to people? Tweaks or something, because it might be considered by people underhand. You said this and that happened.
So the area you're talking about is not within the borough.
I'm just using that as an example. I'm going to say IM Properties have done it elsewhere, and they're going to build a huge place down the road if they get away with it. And I can see.
At the moment, we're not talking about anything within North Warwickshire, are you? You're talking about.
I'm just using that as an example.
As part of the consultation for any of our planning policies, we'll give you the best information that we've got at that time. And during the process, we may be given more information, and that builds into the picture so that we can provide that as we go through. We'll always try, and whether it's the planning policy side or a planning application, we'll always try and give you the best information that we possibly can. That doesn't mean to say that is what will be eventually built, or that will be how the site will actually be used at the end of the day. That is sometimes up to the market as it goes through the process, or it could be other reasons. So we will always try to give you the best information that we possibly can get for you to make the decision at that moment in time, knowing though that time can march on and things can change.
David, all right? Davina?
But I expected the answer, but no, I'm not happy.
Okay, that's noted. Davina?
Just a quick one. It's my favourite subject, and I do bang on about it, I know, but it seems more like a chicken and egg than a movable. And Councillor Osborne, I know the A5, and we keep banging on about the A5, but I think H4 is going to be difficult unless we get that. And also deliverability on the master plan, the condition of the ground, the housing market, what's happening with our economy, that sort of thing. So if there was a material difference, or if there was something happening that was materially different in that part of the plan, that site, that then spoke further consultation on that.
To be honest, I can't tell you as I sit here today. I honestly don't know. It depends what the change is. Depends how big the change is. It depends whether it's on a planning application or whether it's on the policy side. I was just looking back through on item 5, that table 1 and the timeline, and we went out a number of times in terms of the consultation for the local plan because there was perhaps a change that we didn't feel hadn't quite been consulted on in the manner that we would have liked or whatever. So there are options to add in additional consultation times, and we will try to advise us when we feel that that this is enough of a change that we'd say that we're not considering like for like anymore or something like that. So.
All right. Okay, members, I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to bring agenda item number 6 to a close unless anybody's got any burning issues. No, I mean, it's an interesting time, isn't it? We've got work to do, particularly around the employment DPV, which will come to us at some point over the next few months. Right, so let's go for the recommendation to executive board. that the local development scheme is approved in its format as printed today, but we will review it as a live document. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. Spotting on to agenda item number 7, which is page 25 of 205 in your pack. Now, before we start on this, it's the draft scoping report for consultation. But we've just noted a slight change to the recommendation, which is recommendation to the subcommittee.
Yes, that's right. Because this subcommittee has got delegated powers for consultation, then the recommendation would be as part of this subcommittees rather than having to go through executive for approval.
Okay, thank you much indeed. So do you want to present the report then, Doc?
Okay, we actually produced a sustainability appraisal scoping report way back into 2006 when we were producing the core strategy. And then every time we produced a sustainability appraisal that accompanied any of the policy documents, that scoping got updated. As we're moving forward, we've got an adopted local plan. We just felt that we should actually try and do it again and see where we get to with that. So this is very initial stages at actually producing the draft scoping report, and a lot of work has gone into trying to update the scoping report and all of its background information in terms of that. So reason that I'm bringing it to you though is I know there's a lot of changes that potentially will happen, and you've previously had reports on the environmental outcomes report which will overtake the sustainability appraisal work. But whilst we're producing the policy documents of the Employment DPD and the Gypsy Travellers DPD, they need to be accompanied by sustainability appraisal work. So that's the reason why we're bringing it to you, and that this would then go out for consultation. As you can see in table 1, which is the stages of the sustainability appraisal process on page 26 of your pack, this is stage 1, so very early stages of actually producing this. And it's supposed to be an iterative process where you produce a document, you assess it against the objectives that are set out here, and the policies and the plans and the background, and that all informs the policy development in terms of that. Happy to take any questions. There is a correction or just some clarification that I should give on page 37 of 207. On my printed version, it's come out all gobbledygook. It was just to say what it actually said, which 14A says valuing, enhancing and protecting the biodiversity of North Warwickshire.
So you can see the page I'm holding up, it's highlighted in yellow, so it's one of the boxes that hasn't formatted properly. So, a hugely complex document. And the consideration tonight is, can we put it out for 6 weeks consultation, and making that decision, we know that we are at stage 1, the very beginning of the process. So, does anybody have any questions or observations? Mr. Susan, Mark?
I was hoping I wouldn't have to go first because I'm not entirely sure where I am with this. My first question, Chairman, is who is this going to? Who are we aiming the consultation at? And I'm presuming it's all the languages and particularly interests. Because frankly, if this is going to the average person in the street, they won't be able to get through it, let alone understand it and effectively consult with us. So my first question is, are we clear? To whom are we addressing the consultation? expecting back. Because I think if we are genuinely sending this to North Warwickshire residents,
Okay.
then we need to think through what are we actually asking, and actually giving people a fair chance of actually being able to give us an answer. Frankly, I've been honestly struggling to understand the scope, purpose, and everything else of it. So I would have thought my fellow men and women in the borough would equally struggle.
Okay, should we answer your points as you make them? So let's do point one. So I mean, it's only 150 pages long.
It is, fortunately, yes. And it just shows you the amount of evidence and background information that there is out there. So I totally agree that the system is very much geared towards that this consultation would be more towards the statutory consultees and to someone who is really, really interested in planning. That is the reason why the government is changing the process to be these environmental outcome reports. But unfortunately, because we are working on the employment DPD and the Gypsy and Traveller, we need this to go alongside those documents. So as part of any consultation though, we would try to explain what the sustainability appraisal is actually for, what it does and things like that. And also during the consultation, because this would go out for consultation, excuse me, alongside the employment DPD and the Gypsy and Travellers, as well as any other documents that we're going to consultation out with. And so what we've done previously, we've had a lot of drop-in events where we can talk specifically to individuals and to explain what all the documents are. I can probably safely say there is, when I've been to some of the drop-in events, there's only been about a handful of people that have ever asked us about the sustainability appraisal, because they've seen the folders and just gone, don't like it. But unfortunately, it is a legal process that we must do.
And I get that, Sharon, but for consultation to be effective and for us to be able to use it, honestly use it, as we say, we've done it, it's on the shelf. It's got to be meaningful. And honestly, I'm not intending this as a criticism of the work that's been done, because there is clearly a vast amount of person hours that's doing this. I'm just not sure how, frankly, how members of the council will get it, let alone anybody outside the building. And I genuinely, I do think we should be trying to deliver stuff like this. I get the point in terms of the statutory consultees, genuinely. But for the mere mortals like the rest of us,
I think it's an interesting point, isn't it?
This is ticking the box.
And perhaps when we go out, I've got Michael and then Rachel, but when we go out, perhaps when we present it to our residents, maybe we should concentrate on the 18 SA objectives and guide people to say, well, if you've got a view on something, because there'll be very few people who view on everything, but I'm sure there will be some people who would like to express a view on one of the 18 or one of the 18 objectives. Michael, you've got...
Nine sort of sets that out. He says what we're bothered about. Yeah, I don't mean let's have an idiot's guide, but let's have an idiot's guide. So that I might get it.
Yeah, Dot. Michael, have a view?
As part of the consultation process, we can look at that and see how we can make it as user-friendly as we possibly can, and I'm happy to do.
Okay, and how would we just deal with process? So if we were approving it to go out tonight, what would you do? You'd come back to us with a proposal about how to make it digestible?
We can either do that at the September meeting if you wish. I can bring back something that is either a leaflet or, as you say, an idiot's guide to simplified version.
Okay, good. Now I'm conscious you've got a second question, but I can see that Michael and Rachel, are your views about the digestibility that Mark has raised?
Yeah, it's what Councillor Simpson said, really, that it could come in a dense version with those topics and themes, and then with probably some pictorial elements to it for me.
Yeah, not me.
I've always been.
I
better
like
with
pictures.
I find that it's Councillor Simpson's point about 5 or 6 people turning up, then the team over there have got to explain to them anyway about what it actually means. Then it's not really effective consultation. I totally agree. So the more we can show that we've done a bit of due diligence and trying to get that broadened out, so as many people like me can understand it, the better, I think. Yeah.
Rachel, sorry, my legal point.
The consultation for the strategic environmental assessment is the statutory requirement consultation is with those consultation bodies as to the information and level of details we include in the sustainability appraisal report. So those are the people we must consult. I understand entirely that there may be other feedback which informs that, but as mentioned at the outset, the purpose of that part of the consultation is specifically at those bodies which are listed because of the expertise that they have on informing them. But it doesn't. That is an obligation. It doesn't use.
Okay, thank you. I've got Rachel and then I've got Dave.
I think it is following on from Mark's point, and this will probably show that I haven't read every single page and inwardly digested it. But the first thing that sprang to my mind was about the consultees and even statutory consultees, whether they include parish councils and town councils, in which case I think certainly a more user-friendly, I'm not going to call them idiots, but a more user-friendly guide would be helpful. But also about structuring what we're trying to find out from consultees, and perhaps a short list of questions where we could guide them and ask either direct or indirect questions about the particular aspect that we want feedback on. And I think that helps people get into it and say, well, I didn't realise that plan dealt with that issue. And I have a burning desire to sort of say something about that. So even a one-sided, a little bit like a sort of feedback form. How was your experience on the phone today, sort of thing. But a guided set of questions go out with the report to other consultees. And I think then we may have more community engagement, which is actually what we want, particularly when we're thinking ahead to designing a new development plan, because we want those people and organisations on board to guide us in terms of how our development plan should look when we do the next one. And I think starting that process by helping them to consult with us in a way that sort of Councillor Simpson, Councillor Osborne have said, in terms of a sort of user-friendly, shorter version, a summary, perhaps on 2 or 3 sides of A4, but then with a set of questions.
Getting longer.
Well, there's the user-friendly guide, and then the set of questions, which is the one side of A4. And then people can have a link then, whole plan, so they can refer to it, but some of the other things can be sent out in paper form. Those organisations that maybe aren't so easy to access it.
So I've got Dave, but let me just say, I think we're all saying the same thing.
Yeah.
However, Clive points out our statutory obligations, which we must progress regardless, and then we'll look at how we make it more digestible with the resources at hand, because as I sit here looking across this room, I am looking at the 3 resources at hand. So we'll come back on the 11th with a community resident consultation, but my request as chair will be that we've got to be able to manage A, the preparation, and B, the results of the consultation in terms of whatever the proposal you bring back.
Yes, and as part of that, we'll be bringing back an update of the statement of community involvement as well, just updating that because that was adopted back in 2007. So that will be another item that September as well.
Okay.
But as part of the local plan, yeah, we will we're trying to make it as user friendly as we possibly can.
Excellent. So you're not having any summer holidays or anything, if you're going to get all this work done before the 11th of September. Excellent. Excellent. And I just remind members that obviously we are also the conduits for information going out. So it isn't just the officers that have a responsibility. We very much do, particularly the process of making it understandable if we understand it ourselves in the first place. Michael, you were going to say something?
Thank you, Chair. It was really just to summarise the SA scoping report on the lines that Mr. Simpson mentioned in terms of simplification. The former traditional approach to the SEA was always broken. Sustainability was always broken. 3 headings: social, economic. Perhaps if we stress those and separate topics, then of course, talking environmental, then the primary stakeholders, which is risk assessment principle, environment agency, and then you will get natural England, environmental side. And similarly, you'll have social, where you'll have housing, economic, really looking with employment. And again, it may well be an element of the exercise. It's the various stakeholders, strategic stakeholders, that have an influence and an interest in making sure that we address all the issues that they think of. That's part of the difficulty. We are second guessing this that they are looking out for. That's their responsibility. Hence, easy one, don't build them.
I'm looking forward to seeing 3 sides of A4 with pictures. I don't know how you're going to do it with pictures, but I'm still looking forward. David, you're going to... Is this a comment about Mark's original point, or?
Well, is 6 weeks long enough? And my experience throughout the planning on the county as well is the statutory authorities can't respond in time. Do they get an open-ended ticket then? Or you close it in 6 weeks' time, but they don't answer, but you can't do anything about it because they don't answer, which is what happens at the moment when we deal with Jeff Brown and other people. And I'm thinking of statutory at highways and Severn Trent, and they are brick wall every time we try to do something.
Without naming any companies, obviously.
The consultation is a minimum of 6 weeks, so if members always feel that it should be longer. We have done 8 and 12 weeks consultations in the past, but sometimes that doesn't really help because a lot of people then just leave their consultation response just to the last minute anyway. So we'll be in your hands on that, but we're happy to take your advice.
Okay, noted, thank you. Mark, is this a continuation of your original point 1, or are you moving on to point? Of course. Okay.
The continuation.
The continuation first, so I can conceptually just close it down in my own mind.
Simply say that a lot of councils used to not meet in August. So if we are consulting parish councils, 6 weeks isn't going to happen.
Just a point of clarification that this is approving the consultation for when we go out with all of the documentation. So that would be in the autumn. So this is the first approval of a document that then we can get ready for that consultation for when we go out with the employment DPD, the Gypsum Travellers and things like that.
Yeah. The next point, and I'll try and do them all, Sharon, because I don't.
Well, look at the debate you started with point 1. I hope we haven't got too many points.
Question is, how standard is this document and compared to how bespoke is it to North Yorkshire? I'm always sort of trying to wrestle. Clear there's a lot of work on it, but you're asking us for a view on it. And if I'm only given a choice of one isn't really a choice. So what I don't get is this a relatively standard national template? Is it bespoke into our particular local needs and aspirations? And how does that work? Because there are things in here which I think are particularly local. And there are other things which don't feel local at all. second point on that is, when I look at the chart on page 58, some of these things are, I'm sure, well written, but they almost need to be, and again, I don't want to say idiot, but they need to be reviewed by somebody like me. Because if I look at the percentage on page 58, it says works mainly to an offshore location in no fixed place, 15%. I'm sure we haven't got 15% of people in an offshore location. So the implication is that we've got 15% of people who move around a lot, opposed to working offshore location. But we need to be clear how we are delivering a message. If you look further beneath that, which has got an average population of 6,500, surely means 65. So there are things I think we should check. In here as well, there is a comment that it says we haven't got enough council housing. Now that may or may not be right. I think we mean we haven't got enough socially affordable housing. And I'd be grateful if we can just take out the reference to council housing, because frankly, the authority is one provider amongst a bunch of others. And I know that's what we need. Just let's almost, before it goes out to consultation, we just check those things to be sure that we're getting the emphasis. I don't know if you can even the emphasis, but if we're getting the touch right, so that what I wouldn't want is all the social provision providers come to us as though we really want to work, because I don't believe. So I think there are things in here which feel local. There are things which feel distinctly national, and therefore less relevant to us in a way. Because I guess we're trying to look at our own sustainability, or indeed I think what we do is a framework to assess the sustainability planning policy. Because I think a lot of people need to begin with look at, well, how are we going to deliver this? But actually this is enabling us to make sure we have sustainable policies, not that we actually deliver those sustainable policies. Sorry, that went on a bit. Didn't mean it to, but hey, motor mouth again.
Oh, God. Yes, right. Well, I hope you can answer that, because I was struggling.
The template is what we originally had within some of the 2006 information, but we've then added to that from more latest other people's documents of these, because normally consultants would produce this for us, I must admit, and have done in the past. And so we've actually done this in-house to try and cut the middleman out, I suppose. So there are elements of information which we can only find that are broader than the borough, and then there are elements of information that is very specific to the borough. So there is that range of, some will be very bespoke to North Warwickshire, and other bits are less so. So yes, but yes, more than happy to make sure that it's proofread before any
6,500 people living in North.
Definitely.
Okay, well, you know that we always get somebody from.
That's not real.
Okay. So let me just go back. Has anybody else got any other questions before we try to do so? Right, so let's just go back to the recommendation, which is always a good place to start. So, are we under a timeline to get it out, or a time limit to get it out in terms of our statutory duty?
No.
Right.
It would go out with all of the other documents that I've already mentioned, as well as an update of the, if approved by members, the statement of community involvement as well. So there'd be a range of documents that would be going out. So what I didn't want to do was bring all the documents in one go in September.
Yeah.
I tried to stagger them in terms of actually bringing them to.
So are we going to defer this then? Are you going to ask us to approve it tonight with the provisos that we've discussed around making it digestible for our residents and community population?
I would prefer if you said, yes, it's approved for consultation, subject to us making sure that we produce something that is more digestible. At the front, there is a non-technical summary, and we could use that as the basis of producing something that is more of a user guide and something like that. But we're more than happy to, if you want that user friendly to come back, or we can talk to members generally outside of the subcommittee.
Okay.
I'm in your hands as to what you prefer.
So members, the proposal then, as Dot has explained it, is as written in the board with the advisor that will do a bit of work on making it understandable.
And structure some questions. And structured questions.
Yeah. So is everybody happy to approve the recommendation as amended? All those in favour? Indeed, that's unanimous. Good debates as ever in this forum. Oh yeah. Right, so that moves us on to agenda item number 8, which is the draft Gypsy and Traveller Development Plan document, scoping issues and options for consultation. Now you'll find this on page 172 of your online document pack. Now, before we start debate on I'll ask Dot to take us through the report. I'm going to make a proposal around a change to the recommendation. So if everybody is on page 172 at the moment, I'll be guided by your lawful advice. The recommendation as it stands at the moment is recommendation to the subcommittee that approval is given for consideration to be carried or consultation to be carried out on the draft Gypsy and Traveller Development document, scope, issues and options. What I'd like to do is change that recommendation to say that approval is given for member consultation to be carried out and reported back to the next meeting of this committee on the 11th of September. So as opposed to the recommendation saying let's go straight out to public, what I'm proposing for the amended recommendation is let's thoroughly consult with members with a view to then determining about going to public consultation at our meeting on the 11th of September. And Doc works through the report, you'll see we don't lose much time. But I feel that we need to make sure that as members we're all fully understanding the complexities of the document before it goes out and we have had opportunity to have a view or supplement. Michael.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I fully support that view. I think it adds a layer in that we can put that shows we've thought it through at another stage as well. We can use that time wisely and then it goes to the public.
Thank you. So, Dot, do you want to present the report?
Sure.
Sorry.
Mark, I just have for clarity, the consultation is that with members of this subcommittee or members
North Warwickshire members,
also all members,
or North Warwickshire Council. Okay.
Yeah, so it was just about clarity, just to be sure that we didn't inadvertently include people who shouldn't be, who or not include somebody who shouldn't.
Okay, so it's all elected North Warwickshire councillors. Okay.
Can I just ask that document then itself, the Gypsies and Travellers Development Plan document, scope, issues and options consultation, which is here as Appendix A and starts on page 177, is sent to us as a single document so that we can then
Read it.
and well not only read it, but we can actually forward it to people and seek consultation. Makes that that job easier.
So let's be clear, it is a member consultation, not public consultation.
Yeah.
And then on the 11th of September, we will determine the public consultation. So it would be a restricted document when it came out for circulation and sharing. Right. So, Doc, let's present the report.
I haven't really got a lot to add to the report, really, other than what you have at Appendix A is the scope, issues and options. And as you can see, we provide the information and we also set out a number of questions. We've got over 30 odd questions on there. 40 in fact. So we do ask a range of questions in terms of the needs, the capacity, what type of sites, and all of those sorts of issues. So we've tried to cover the vast amount of questions that we feel that we should be asking. And then following the consultation, we'll then determine what will then go into the actual plan itself.
Yeah. Okay then, thank you very much indeed for that. And before I open it up to consultation, could you just brief us on where our neighbouring district councils within Berkshire and indeed any of our near neighbours at Birmingham or Midfield are?
The Neath and Bedworth Borough Council, they're awaiting an inspector's a report letter on their draft site allocations plan, which has already been to examination. Hinkley and Bosworth, they in November 22 said that they were going to do a new study to inform their site allocations plan for Gypsy Travellers. There isn't a latest update on that yet, but I do know that they've had a number of staff who have left, so that's probably the reason there. Rugby Borough Council are doing a new study onto the needs of Gypsy Travellers. The South Warwickshire local plan, which of course include Warwick and Stratford, they were looking at the needs to be addressed in their draft local plan, and have also asked for sites to be put forward as part of that consultation for needs of Gypsy Travellers. Birmingham City Council have just recently sent us a request because they are now doing a study as well on the needs of Gypsy Travellers there. And then North West Leicestershire are also doing a study on the needs of Gypsy Travellers, as well as a call for sites as well.
And did we cover Staffordshire? I didn't the Staffordshire as well.
Tamworth Borough Council and Lichfield District Council are the only ones that I know that they've done studies, but I'm not aware that they've actually progressed anything to deal with any needs of Gypsy Travellers. And South Staff, I'm afraid I don't know the latest on South Staff.
So am I right in thinking then from why that everybody is much the same, at the same position?
Yeah, everybody needs to deal with and is looking at the needs of Gypsy Travellers and determining how many pitches, be them permanent transit sites, as to what they need to provide, and then are looking for sites as well. So yeah, it's across the board.
And are any of the authorities looking at a combined approach? Because clearly this is a regional issue.
Yeah, not that we're aware of. The only combined approach is from the southern Warwickshire area to investigate whether a joint affordable site could be provided. But the difficulty that we would have is that would that really cater for the needs that we've got? Because a lot of the Gypsy Travellers would commute along the A5, so that would tend to be more South Staff's Rugby area rather than the Warwickshire and Stratford area.
Okay, thank you. Members, I'll throw it open to debate if anybody has any questions or views. And that's not. So can we move on?
Sorry,
Okay.
I'm genuinely waiting for everybody else.
You were waiting for the drama of jumping in at the last minute before I moved to the recommendation.
Chairman, I'm absolutely in favour of giving members the opportunity to be more constant. But it almost needs to be a tutor consultation, because some of this DPD deals with technical to work through. In particular, reference that it's the wording the sub-regional site potential, because I can read that in a number of different ways. Yeah, for example, however, these are likely to be too few to serve the needs of the whole county, but the Borough Council still need to sort out its own need of pathway. You can read that as saying, going to provide sites for the whole county. Well, no, that's not what it is. But I think, if you like, this is a genuinely very sensitive issue for a lot of people. And it's incredibly sensitive for the people it's trying to help. So, you know, I think it's almost like a seminar or workshop that we can attend, and any members of the council who are interested, particularly or particularly concerned, can attend and try to, if you like, take some of the heat out of it. Because when we've had conversations before in this area, been more people expressing their concerns rather than trying to find a solution. This is generally, I think, trying to find a solution. There are some things in here I generally don't get why I'm asking and how, if you like, that should. I'm looking to find the right question, but I think there's something about, are we meeting all the cultural needs of the subject population? It's not sure in my own head how we need to try and address all the cultural needs as opposed to try and find a housing site. So, you know, I think there are deeper questions to you know, again,
so what
trying to help me to understand. And
so what are you proposing? You're proposing that between now and the 11th of September we held a members training session on this, or a consultation session rather,
yeah,
on this document?
Yeah, rather than just send it over, just saying, what do you think? Send it over and saying, what do you think? And if you would like to come to a workshop on it, members will be, officers will be available to talk you through what it's trying to achieve and why the questions are what the questions are, so that you don't misunderstand it when you tick the box. For me, Chairman, personally, one overarching comment I have is, can we not ask for a yes or no question? Because quite often that is just restricting people to what they can say. The number in here where it says yes or no. If we honestly just want yes, there's one at least where it says yes or no, but gives you reasons. So, well, hang on, what do we mean? Do we mean yes or no, or do we mean something else? Okay. So I just think, personally, I don't benefit by a session just on this, that all my colleagues can attend if they wish.
Michael?
Really quick one. Would it be worth involving the Gypsy traveller liaison for Warwickshire, and that he may be able to give us a.
Yes, yeah, I'm sure we can invite Martin Rowan Clark.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of timescales here, Doc. So clearly, we'd like to facilitate everybody being engaged, and we're now rocketing towards holiday season. So what would be the scope of delivering a consultation session to members at the beginning of September? Would we push to make the next board? Didn't make the next board? Would it be a problem if we deferred it to the following board after September?
We could do workshop for members, but do it so that we give a range of dates. So we could do morning session, afternoon, and an evening session. And so that we're available to go through the documents at that stage. Because that's what we've often done in the past with the parish councils, is that we've given a range of dates, and we've basically done the same presentation, but we've had different questions as we've gone through, and that might help with the holiday situation as well, so that we're not just giving one particular date and expecting everybody to come to that. So that might be an option. And in terms of meeting the deadline, we have got a meeting on the 11th of September that's booked in. Then very selfishly, I'm then on holiday for a while. So it would be sort of mid-October that we could possibly have another LDF, or if it can wait till the November one, then. So if we can still aim for the 11th of September, and if at any stage we deviate from them, we can see what we take from there.
Okay, Martin.
I'm generally happy with that. October's book. The other stuff that's in here that we can come back.
Yeah, what's all this about having holidays, Doc? Hang on.
And genuinely, Chairman, I do take to heart, this is a recommendation to us, so can give a consultation. Get it back in, but then we'll go out to a further period of members will have the opportunity to be consulted internally, and then they can be consulted externally, and then it'll come back to us again for a review before we actually adopt it. So, I get the point, and genuinely, I think we should do a lot of that, but no, overkill it, because there's going to be two opportunities for members. I'd rather give everyone the opportunity for a tutored understanding. I'm just sorry that.
Okay.
If they can't make it, then there's plenty of time after.
Rachel?
Yeah, I think Dave, you suggested it before, was trying to fit in a meeting between now and the 11th of September of this subcommittee. If we made that a more open invitation, and specifically to discuss this paper and potentially the employment paper. And I think consultation and a training session are two different things. And consultation should be done through the subcommittee. But perhaps, I mean, like other councillors have attended this evening, I think it's more of an encouragement to other councillors to attend. They want to actively participate, but also they could feed that through the members subcommittee and do it in that sort of structured way, rather than the officers having to spend a whole day when councillors might all be dropping in. I think that's perhaps too much to ask them with everything else that's going on.
Okay, David?
So can we sort of get an understanding of the numbers, if I could, because it says here in 3.1, 19 permanent residential gypsy and traveller pitches 2019 to 2033. And I take it is that we have to do? Is that including what they do for themselves? And the reason I ask that, there's over 40 illegals that farm, so that 19 is not getting anywhere near the number of actually in our borough. So I just wondered how we generate those numbers and come up with the number 19.
Oh, thank you, Councillor. The 19 is a straightforward figure coming out of the Gypsy and Travellers assessment. That is one of the questions we are asking, is whether we rely on that, or whether we do consider whether we undertake a review. Exactly the implications you just raised. There's another detail as well, relates back to what Councillor Simpson referred to, which is the cultural need. That question is directly coming out of a High Court challenge decision. Previously, the GTA 19 and permanent residential. It also refers to a number which I think approaches in total, if you add 19 into a total of 41 in total, the additional 20 odd relate to those who do not comply with the legal definition of planning guidance. That was challenged, and it was challenged because effectively it excluded certain elements of the community. Not because they weren't gypsies, because they were no travelling. So if you're ill, disabled, elderly, child, you physically can't, does that exclude you from having a birth? And that was the basics in a crude way of the challenge. And the challenge was, it succeeded. How you address it is far more complex. What they're looking through the Gypsy and Travellers DPD, the site location DPD, or others are, is how do we address that wider cultural need? So we know those that comply very narrowly with the Gypsy and Travellers definition. Those who are travelling to work, travelling regularly. But that doesn't mean people who are no longer travelling aren't gypsies. So how do you address them? Previously, we were relying on their part of the housing market. They are common. However, that all authorities are wrestling with that because they're effectively saying, well, a house does not necessarily satisfy my cultural need. Then you throw into the got other elements of talking gypsies, we're talking about cheese, would involve canal and river net. We're already aware that we have significant numbers of people residing. So it is how long, I don't want to say it too obviously, but it's how long is a thing? And it is partly the reason why we have issues and options, because these questions will be thrown back at us. And we know from the committee themselves and the liaison officer who will be saying this is, right, you've got your 19 in your GTA, but what are you going to do about the other 41? That's an issue we will need to consider.
Okay, thank you, Michael. It's a good question. I know that Clive wants to make a point.
Is add to Mike's point, that case, but to the definition given guidance since 2015, which was effectively said exactly the point that made about people travelling as part of their lifestyle. The particular challenge was specific to a planning decision made by the authority, and therefore was decided on that basis. And the court determined that whilst the definition said one thing, consideration for was broad, those others who are no longer, for some reason, not able to travel for some time. The government as yet has not revised its guidance, but there is a very real practical consideration, because where you take the narrow view of the government guidance, make a decision solely, you will have another challenge on the same basis, and so that is probably one of the perhaps most pressing and possibly most difficult to identify aspects of this process in terms of it's pressing because we know it's likely to affect any decisions we make in the future, but it's the just referred to. We need to make sure we're casting our net wide enough to identify those who may be affected. So I think that's probably a crucial thing for the process as a whole, but also the engagement with members to make sure that we are satisfied that we are going out wide. This goes to general consultation.
Thank you. Right, members, I need to draw you back to the recommendation, because I am a bear with very little brain and I am beginning to struggle. So the recommendation is member consultation to report back to 11th of September meeting of the LDF. We're considering that, and an addition then arising from the debate that chair, together with opposition spokesman, who I think is Rachel from the LDF, agree a series of consultation sessions in line with officer capacity between now and the 11th. Everybody okay with that? Yeah. Okay, all those in favour? Anybody can do, that's carried. And I believe that is the last agenda item, so thank you for your attendance, very interesting as ever.